Well, I actually had a dream where I was standing on a beach and I saw these two tails come up out of the water, and the water was kind of cascading off of them, and I woke up thinking, boy, that would make a great fountain. And as I started playing around with the idea, I later decided it would be better to use the ground as an imaginary ocean surface, partly so that people could walk right up to them and feel the scale, and also just to kind of force people to use their imaginations a little bit. Well, I was living with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, in Boston for couple of years, and my sister and brother-in-law used to live in Brookfield, Vermont, so we used to come visit them. Every so often they would say, you know, friends of ours just bought this house for $10,000, and I said, gee, if you ever find a cheap house, let us know. And lo and behold, just before we were about to get married, they called up and said, you should come look at this old farmhouse in Randolph. We ended up coming and falling in love with it. That was in 1974. Back in 1984, I was a finalist in a competition, a public art competition up in Anchorage, Alaska, and I had had the idea of making a sculpture like that, and I proposed it as my proposal in this competition. It came close, but it didn't end up working out, and after having made some small scale models, a local businessman saw the models, and even though I had planned to make them out of bronze, he asked me if I could make them out of granite. And when I realized he was serious about it, I figured out how I could, and he ended up commissioning me to make them for his site in Randolph, which is right up by Exit 4. And I got the sculpture all done after about 9 months of working on it, and we installed it, and shortly after that he ended up selling the land, and the fellow who bought the land didn't want to pay the extra money it would take to have the sculpture stay there, so he ended up selling that sculpture to the folks in Burlington, South Burlington. I moved them up there after having spent 10 years in Randolph, and now they've been in South Burlington about 22 or 3 years. You know, the funny thing is, I always had a different title for it, which was pas de deux, the French for a dance for two. I always thought of them as kind of dancing forms. And at one point, the owner of the land and the sculpture thought it might be nice to use the sculpture as a focal point to raise funds for environmental issues and organizations. And we got pretty far with the idea, during which we thought the name Pas de Deux might be a little hard for people to pronounce, so I started looking for a different name, and I came up with reverence, the meaning for which is an attitude of deep respect tinged with awe. And I thought for me that kind of represented the nature in general, which is kind of what I was using the whales as a symbol for. After the first piece, which was called Reverence, kind of suddenly left. People didn't really know anything about the plans, and a lot of people seemed to really miss having them there. It kind of gave Randolph some kind of identity, and enough people, I guess, over the years wanted to have them or something like it back there. And when the owner of that property planned to do a kind of a huge development there, people kind of rose up in arms against the idea, and in the end he sold the land to this group, and they raised money to have me create something similar. I told them I wouldn't do exactly the same thing, and at that point I was no longer working in stone, so I said it would have to be bronze. But because it was bronze, it allowed me, for one thing, to make them a little larger and to have a little more movement within the sculpture, because bronze can be bolted down to the foundation and is very strong. I could have them twist and lean and tilt more than I could with the stone, which required a more upright positioning because of the weight.